That's a very important button also. So, okay, folks, my regular audience knows I'm whacked, and they'll know that today a little more whacked than usual. I am delighted to have as my guest, Grace Sammon, on with me. Grace, wonderful. I'm delighted. I've been looking forward to this.
I am so excited to be with you. Thanks for having me. And thanks to Meg Nocero, who's so amazing, for putting us together.
I love Maggie. I call her Meg. She is amazing. She is amazing. And the more I get to know her, the more I just love her. She is an amazing person. Blows me away. So the stuff that she does and posts and writes, all the books. So, but let's talk about you. A little bit about your background, if you would.
Sure. So I grew up in Long Island, New York. I then stayed dozens and dozens of years in the Washington, D.C. area. I started out as an educator. I worked at a university there, and then I started my own educational consulting firm. So I've written four books. The first three were in the area of education, and then I came out with my novel, The Eves. It's set largely in Washington, D.C. and beautiful Maryland. And now I live in Florida. I host 2 different podcasts, and I'm having lots of fun.
A little bit more about what? Seriously, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely. So I raised 2 children in the Washington, D.C. area. And then when I started my educational consulting firm, which was called GMS Partners, we focused on high school improvement around the country. We traveled to 32 states. I traveled about 200 days a year. And our focus was really improving the American high school, which I think is the toughest American institution that we have. And I had the opportunity to work largely in inner city schools, but also on tribal lands and in very remote parts of our country. So that was just an amazing place for me to listen to the stories of educators and students throughout the country. And I think that's where I got my roots in listening to the stories. The subtitle of my book, which is called The Eves, the subtitles is When Our Stories Are Told, Everything Changes.
Yes.
And I really think I learned that there, traveling those 200 days a year. And then when that began to slow down, I thought, now what do I do? And my kids were grown, and I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So I created this incredibly complex character and tried to figure out how she would figure out her life so I could figure out mine.
I love that. When I want to ask you this before we go further. A small herd of imaginary llamas.
I do. When
I read that, I read it over a couple of times to make sure I was graphic. Oh, Grace is showing a little llama.
A little llama. When I wanted to retire, which apparently is something I'm doing a very bad job doing, but when I wanted to retire, I wanted to have a herd of llamas, just a small herd. And then when I moved to Florida, and you can't have fences where I live, that dream sort of dissipated. So in my bio, I say I live with a small herd of imaginary llamas because largely I like to create the world I live in. So yes, beautiful. Imaginary llamas, Louis.
You can't have fences?
Not in my particular development. We're not allowed to have fences.
It's the rules. I get,
and probably not llamas either. Even if we were allowed fences, we're probably not allowed to have
llamas. Probably not llamas. But I love that. I loved when I read that. It was really great. When you think about the writing process, let me go back to the education. I am very concerned about education in our country. Some places obviously better than others. I know the city schools, when I have a guy in from this area, tells me what the GPA is in high school. It's frightening. When I have a elementary school teacher who teaches 3rd to 4th grade, tells me some of the kids are reading at a kindergarten level. I don't know how you catch up from that because they keep moving them forward and sort of forced to move them forward. The teachers are sort of forced to. I get concerned. I used to say years ago, some kids, many years ago, and I know it's worsened in some areas, kids are given a diploma that they probably can't read. And that scares me. I mean, it concerns me. It scares me. It scares me.
Oh, and I think it should. And I think it should scare every American, Louis, honestly. When we started in Anacostia High School, which is in Washington, D.C., it had a 19% graduation rate. Only 19.
19%.
Yeah, that's it. 19% graduation rate. When we finished working there, it had a 95% graduation rate.
Wow.
And
That's
we were
fantastic.
thank you.
Oh, Grace froze up. Come
It was
back.
very learning, personal for the kids, and empowering teachers to teach. That's the simple way of saying what we did, because it was very, very, very hard work for every single person and student involved. But we saw teenage pregnancies drop. We saw the murder rate of our young men drop. And it was a very powerful experience. PBS television did a special on our work. This goes back to the 90s. But in education, so many times the dial goes back to zero. So the contract ends, or the principal changes, or the superintendent. And the dial's up in this mix of and funding and the changes in state testing or the lack of testing. I've gone back and forth on, is it good to test or bad to test? But I think every single one of us should find a way to help with education, even if it's just volunteering to read to kids in the first and second grade.
I'm a big fan of our libraries, and I know that they have tremendous programs. And one of the ones that, Grace, if you don't mind, when I first heard they would have reading to a therapy dog, or they would have little kids, and then they had reading to rabbits, and the rabbit would be in a little basket, a therapy rabbit. And I didn't get it at first. And when it was explained to me, it's like, well, even a parent that doesn't want to say anything, has some body language, or they inhale when they hear a mispronounced word, but the dog isn't going to, the rabbit isn't going to, and it gets them to read out loud, and you can hear what's going on, and they enjoy it because the doggy is sitting next to them, or the rabbit. And I get it, and I love those programs. I think they're fantastic.
Oh, a huge shout out to libraries. As an author, first of all, I just love all librarians. But when I was a single mom, I did not have a lot of money. And my summer programs at my local library in Maryland got me through. I could drop the kids for a little while. I could be with them. That totally changed my ability to parent well and give my children a love of reading. And I love that you pointed those things out. I had a golden retriever therapy dog for a long time, and we both worked with hospice and abused kids, and we did library programs. So I'm so happy that you highlighted that.
That's great about hospice. If you don't mind, again, I want to get into more. I want to get into these, but
we have lots to talk about.
We do, Grace. When I remember the lady that does bunnies in baskets, therapy rabbits. I've gotten to know her well over the years. And I'll never forget the story. She said that they were in a nursing home bringing the rabbits around to see the people. And the staff said, the next guy we're going to is nonverbal. He doesn't speak. So don't be upset. I'm going to get teary-eyed. I tear up every time I tell this story. So takes the rabbit in to see this guy, and the rabbit, he starts talking to the rabbit, and everybody starts crying, of course. See, look at me. I didn't even witness it, and I get very emotional. But it touches and what that meant and what that was, because a lot of people may discount, oh, so you take a dog there. If you're in a hospice, that could be the most important thing to connect with that animal. And when she told me that story, it was just amazing. He didn't talk to people, but he talked to the rabbit, which is beautiful. Sorry.
Absolutely. No, thank you for your sensitivity to that, Louis. I used to say that there was a magic energy, and I don't understand the energy between people. Meg and I actually talked a little bit about this, but there is some, to me, inexplicable energy that we exchange. And when I would go to the hospice house with my therapy dog, and I would just hand them part of the leash, you would think there was an electric current that went directly from them to my dog. And that dog knew it. And that energy,
It's beautiful.
it's a magic thing. So
It is. And I love that you did that. That's and for the people in the hospice, I mean, there's just, it touches people's hearts, your heart certainly. And one of the things when I had an aunt that passed away at 99 years old. And I would go up and see her after the show every day and then go see her on the weekend. She didn't have other family here. And I remember one lady was bringing the dog down, a therapy dog down. And I said, oh, it was a golden doodle. And I called it like a candy bar, some dude, I can't remember exactly what it was. And she said, she was really stern. She said, it's a golden doodle. Oh, I know what I said, snickerdoodle. Here's the snickerdoodle. That was it. I remember it, snickerdoodle. So I was like, oh, I didn't make that mistake again. But you see the people light up, and that's wonderful.
absolutely.
I'll talk about the eaves. What was the, I want to say, tipping point? What was you talked a little bit about earlier, but what was the point where you said, I'm going to write this? I'm putting, I guess people don't put pen to paper anymore or sit and start typing it out on the computer. What was it that actually?
I think I've always tried to wrestle out my challenges with writing. Many authors will say that they don't understand what they really think until they put it on paper. So when I was looking at the fact that I had grown children, they did not need their mom anymore. We certainly had a relationship,
They needed
but I
the
was like,
mom, but yeah.
but I didn't know how to negotiate those waters. My mom had died. My dad was elderly. I knew I couldn't continue to travel those 200 days a year anymore. And I think, and I don't know if this is emblematic of women my age, but I very much lived in roles. I was somebody's wife at one point, somebody's mother at another point, somebody's daughter. I was the president of the educational consulting firm. I was the author of those books. And I said to myself, oh my goodness, who am I without those roles? And I wanted to play with that because I had a future ahead of me. I was not married at the time. And I just wanted to say, how can we create this? So I create this character who's just horribly flawed. She's given up on herself, which is a horrible thing that we say about women. I think particularly she gave up on her looks, but she's given up on pretty much everything except for her lies and her vodka. And she has a very bossy friend who says to her, you are hiding from the world, and this hiding stops.
Wow.
And when she says that, Jessica still doesn't know what to do and really resents her bossy friend, but then decides through her bossy friend that she's going to go take the oral histories of these diverse, determined, and sometimes ditzy old women who live in this beautiful, sustainable farm overlooking the Chesapeake Bay. And everybody's stories change throughout the story. And I really just wanted to play with that. And it was really, for me, an amazing journey. But I'll be honest and tell you, when I thought I was done the book, I thought I was done. But apparently that's not true either.
So tell me about that, when you thought it was done, but it's not.
Really, I wrote the book and I said, okay, that was my goal, to write the book and to have it out there in the world. And I wrote it from that perspective of I'm done. And there's another older character who comes into the book always wanting to, she's constantly saying, I'm done. I want to go on vacation, the kind where you don't need any suitcases. So she's ready to die. And when I was done the book, I did the typical thing that authors try to do, which is, talk about it in wonderful shows like yours, in blogs, on book clubs. I absolutely adore going to people's book clubs. And I did a radio show with a woman named Gail Carson, Dr. Gail Carson, who owned a radio station called Spunky Old Broads. And she called it SOB Radio, which I just adored. And isn't that great? SOB Radio. Yeah. So she asked me on the show. We had a wonderful time. And she called me the next day and said, you need to have your own radio show. And I said, oh, I can't do that. I'm done.
He
And
said,
she said, oh, honey, did you not read your book? You are so not done. And apparently I'm not.
I want, again, I don't know if you can see all the pages I have turned down in the book, and I won't go with
Thank
them
you for
all.
reading it.
Well, I love the dedication. Sometimes I'll say dedications can tell me so much about an author, and sometimes not. Sometimes not. Sometimes they're very, I hate to, shouldn't use the word generic, but they're just, or they have a couple of initials. And of course, I always want to ask if they, or it will tell me who JW is or whatever. But yours was so beautiful. You've got the book. How would you feel about reading that, the dedication?
I would be extraordinarily honored. And I love that you read all the parts. That's such a fun thing for authors, that, when somebody reads all of the parts, not just the book, and they read the back matter and all of that, it makes it ever so much more special. So here's the dedication to my book. With much love, gratitude, and respect and remembrance for Josephine Teresa Caruso Sammon, nearly 2 decades after your death, you still have reach. To the 2 best contributions I have made to this earth, I love you beyond measure. And for my husband, patient and kind and ever positive that it will all work out. You are all my dash.
That's just beautiful. Just beautiful. Again, I've got an author coming on, wrote a book called The Highly Sensitive Male.
Uh-huh.
That's me. Or a highly sensitive man, I should say. That is beautiful. And when you say some of the other parts of the book, I love what you've got in the back. I love the lessons. The lessons is wonderful. And let me turn the page down. The playlist.
Oh, thank you.
Because I was looking at some of the songs, and I'm very disorganized and chaotic, so I'm going all over the place. I hope that's okay with you.
More than okay.
When I saw Hello in there, and I love that song, and I love when Bette Midler sings it. I tend to listen to the John Prine wrote it. That's where I first heard it, and that is such a powerful song, such a beautiful song. And just thinking about it makes me teary. Again.
I love it. I need to watch when you have that other author on. It should be fabulous. The Sensitive Man.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the dedication. Josephine Teresa Caruso Sammon is my mom.
Yeah.
And she's very much the character of Joan in the Eves. And it was a way to honor her. And there's a death scene in the Eves where Jessica is recounting her mom's death. And that is very much my experience with my mom's death. But the dash is so important. There's a chapter in the book where one of the characters says, the date between my birth and my death are filled with more than just a dash. I need the dash to matter. And that's why that dedication comes in, that my children, my mother, my father, and my husband have made that dash between my date of birth and whenever that date of death will happen so much richer.
That's beautiful. I'm talking with Grace Sammon, and gracesammon.net, correct? gracesammon.net. We've got links up at louisfreeshow.com, at wfmj.com. I've got to think about the young techies and louisbfree.com. I think that's, I don't know. The young techies have me doing things that I'd never done before. So I'm learning.
Don't they though?
Oh, I just, I've always said, I've said this a lot on the show though. They want to explain things to me, the technology, this. I said, just tell me what buttons to push and when to push them, and we're cool. Yeah.
That's right.
I don't need to know all the technology, but it's wonderful. Again, gracesammon.net. Excuse me. The other thing I got to say about your playlist, I hadn't listened to Nina Simone in years. I hadn't listened to At Last by Etta James. It's another favorite of mine. And of course, Both Sides Now by Joni and Judy. It's wonderful.
It was really fun to do the playlist because
Tell me.
actually I don't listen to a lot of music personally. I never have my radio on in the car. I don't have the radio on in the house. But when I was writing the Eves, I knew that Jessica, but particularly the character of Jan, was listening to music all of the time. So there are a lot of oldies music, but the pieces that for me in the playlist, and you can get the entire playlist on my website at gracesammon.net, which is spelled not like the fish, but it's spelled Sammon, but said like the fish, but spelled differently. There are a couple of pieces that really motivated the writing. Two were done by Sweet Honey in the Rock out of Washington, D.C., and they're very, very poignant songs about realizing that our children are our children, but they never really belong to us. They belong to the future. And then there's another song at the end. And so I have an overture and I have a coda. But the essence, really, I would say, Louis, was that hello in there, hello, which is so well done by both Prine and Midler.
Yeah. You know the Prine. You know John Prine's version also. He's written some amazing songs, and Bette Midler's voice is just fantastic on that.
Absolutely.
That's another thing that always makes me teary-eyed listening to that. That moves me. And you're also emotional and sensitive. I see that. I love that. I love that, Grace. I really do.
Me too.
Yeah. And again, you're saying you don't listen to music, don't listen to the radio. So tell me a little bit more about putting that. It seemed to me when I read it, it's like, wow, she's got it's very broad. It's the artists and songs are very different from each other. It's not like one genre. So how did you pick the songs, Grace?
Well, part of it is, especially with a first novel, you take a lot out of what you know. So my children filled an iPod, right? That was they don't even have them anymore, I don't think.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the little, yes.
So I have an iPod that I still play. So some of the songs are on that. So they are older songs. And that's why Jan, the older character, listens to many of them. And I used to travel a lot by car when I was doing that 200 days a year. And then on the long nights, I would listen to radio. But as a rule now, I just don't. I don't know why I don't. But the playlist, people have loved that, and the lessons. That was a surprise to me, Louis, because Jessica is so broken. She writes down like these basic lessons, like first, do no harm, be kinder than you need to be.
I love that.
And she's just so broken. And I had, I think it was a book club once say, could we get a copy of the lessons? And I was like, oh, sure, I could do that. So those are up on my website too.
Yeah. And it's, of course, in the book. And that book is The Eves by Grace Sammon, my guest. And you also have the book club. I love that you added that stuff because, again, I'm not involved with book clubs, probably should be. Yeah. I'm an obsessive reader. I've got to be reading. I don't think I could do a book club. It might be fun once. I'd probably get hooked in and that would be it. And then I wouldn't be caught up on my reading or something. When you put those questions, you have a lot of these book clubs. What is that like for you?
I love book clubs. And, the funny thing about it, Louis, is I totally understand what you're saying because I used to be a member of a book club and now I don't have time between the radio show. And I'm also the director of membership for my favorite Facebook group, which is called Bookish Road Trip. And we have a monthly book club there, which is hosted by USA Today bestseller Barbara Conry. So we have a Bookish Road Trip Facebook group. We have a monthly book club. And then I host the Storytellers where I have 4 guests a month. And then we're getting ready to launch a new radio show called Launchpad, which will host book debuts. So I don't have the time to read the way I used to. But book clubs for me, I always love listening to how people both interpret my book and how they react to the book. Because there are some very tough issues about broken relationships between parents and children. There's death issues, there's aging issues, there's who am I in the world issues. So our youngest character is 15 and our oldest character is 94. And when I go to a book club, I am fascinated by what they hear in the characters, whether they like Jessica or not. There are three big plot twists in the book, three very big plot
Very big,
twists.
yeah.
And I like seeing the readers say, oh, I liked that one, or how could you do that right at the end? And that for me says that I did what my job as a writer. I made the connection to somebody's soul. And that's what I think our job is as a writer.
And that's got to feel very gratifying.
Very much so.
And yeah, again, it touches you. Do you know, I know if somebody asked me this question, I wouldn't be able to answer it, but I'm going to ask you anyhow, Grace. I think, well, how would I react to this? Your sensitivity? You know, some people harden, and obviously you've got, excuse me, I have a lot of empathy. Years ago, I would say empathetic people want to know us, but they don't want to be us. And I've given that thought. That was a couple of decades ago.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be devoid of empathy. I'd like to be able to control it a little better. Oh, well. Do you have any idea where that empathy comes from in you? That sensitivity?
I love your question. So I'm going to answer it very thoughtfully. I believe that I was sexually abused as a child. It's something I don't always share.
You're in the club.
Oh,
I was too.
oh,
I was also. But we grow.
I'm sorry.
You grow from it. Go ahead. Finish what. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, it's not a club that either one of us would want to be part of.
No.
In my case, it was a family friend, a Catholic priest. So that always, adds to that whole thing that our society goes through in terms of how do we feel about that. But when that happened to me, I realized I had no voice because it was a time, and I never once blamed my parents for this. This was at a time where nobody talked about child abuse, didn't understand it, could certainly not believe that it came from a Catholic priest. And also, when I ran in to tell my mom that this happened, she was trying to get dinner on the table without the microwave, without the washer and dryer. I was 12, so, it was 60 something. And she was trying to get dinner on the table for 7 people, including the Catholic priest. So she couldn't possibly have processed it. But I realized at that point, I had no voice. And at that point forward, I both questioned my voice, to be quite honest, was it my fault, etc. But there was something that said people deserve to be listened to. And that's why the John Prine song, Hello in There, matters so much. It's hello in there. Don't stop and stare as if you didn't care. Say hello in there. Hello. And then I did so much work in inner city schools for kids who also had no voice, that they were getting a substandard education. And I remember there was a Star Trek character on one of the iterations, and she was an empath. And I can't remember her name, but she was the empath on the bridge. And it was horrible. She felt everybody's pain so amazingly. And I went, oh my God, sign me up. And the final part though of that, Louie, is you and I are old. I believe
I'm older than you.
by a smidgen. I believe one of the gifts of age is empathy. We realize the mistakes we made. We realize when we said something that was not as kind as we could have said it. We realize we're frail. And I don't mean frail as in frail, but we are fragile human beings. We are on the short end of the stick, if you will. So I think those are the things that gave me the gift of empathy. Even if I get really mad at you now, it's not going to last. I'm not going to stew about it the way I stewed for days in the past.
Yeah, I hope you don't get mad at me today. Right? Or any day. I hope you don't.
Never.
Any day. When you said the abuse, if you don't mind,
Sure.
Again, like you say, it's a club no one wants to be in, and I wouldn't want anyone. It'd be nice if that all pedophilia just went away. But I was also abused by an Orthodox priest who would come to my parents' house for dinner once in a while. The odd twist, when I tell people, they'll say, well, how did a little Jewish boy get molested by it? Well, it's a long story. and a couple other. But again, the other thing, when people will say to me, you're a victim. I said, wait a minute, I was victimized. I am not a victim today, other than the self-victimization that I do. I impose upon myself, but not. And you grow from it and understand it. As a kid, did you go through a period, Grace? And I hope you don't mind me exploring this with you.
No, okay? Of course not.
Did you go through a period where you weren't actively remembering the abuse?
No, I didn't. And I think part of that has to do with age, or that's my theory anyway. So it's interesting how our stories are similar. Priest coming to dinner, what a great opportunity for him. And I've got to believe that our family members didn't ever anticipate that. I was 12 at the time, so I had a lot of words, to go around that in my head. Even if I wasn't allowed to say those words, I had words to describe that. Shame, etc. I've spoken to other victims, and see, that's the word we use, but it's not the word I like to use either. But I've spoken to other people who have been victimized, and I will now use your word. And I think if they were younger, they didn't have those words, that they didn't know their bodies as well as I knew my body as a 12-year-old.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think part of it has to do with the age of it. I'm sure part of it has to do with complexity and duration. I remember talking to a friend of mine who poo-pooed my abuse because she had been abused longer. And I just went, there is somebody who needs a little more empathy.
Yeah. I mean, so they almost hold it as, some people hold on to it and self-victimize, I would say, about that. And I have to tell you, when I spoke to this is my pre-radio days that I spell with a Z, that when I spoke with a group there were psychologists, social workers, therapists, group, and I was on a small panel. And at that time, and again, this was this was probably maybe 35 years ago, probably. For me, I was dealing with it, but I would say what I thought were jokes about my molestation, not anybody else's. And sometimes I needed to lighten it when they would ask, a question from me. And it was interesting when one of the people, again, I don't know if it was a psychologist there, but she said, well, you're making jokes about your abuse, but aren't you in fact scarred for life? And I thought about it. I wanted to be thoughtful in my response. When someone asks that, I don't want to be immediately reactive. So my response was, I've got scars on my body that I know where they are, but they have faded over the years unless I rip them open. So that's scarred for life. It's just, how do you grow? Like the person you were saying, it's like your abuse mine was worse than yours. It's like, you're going to play that real. I mean, that's just, and I've heard about that before. Well, this happened to me and you didn't, or you were only molested for, it's like,
right.
Wow.
Yeah. It's great. And you would think we would be kindred spirits somehow.
Wouldn't you?
But
yeah.
Well, Pablo Freire wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It's an old book now. And the theory of Pablo Freire's book is that we always like to have somebody who is worse off than us to make us feel better. But I also think there's this weird thing about, oh, I'm so much worse off than you in a different spectrum.
Yeah.
I also think that some people are bitter. And bitter to me is the thing that I wish I could erase in people's hearts, because bitter is ugly and cranky and spiky. And I was very lucky in that, although I wouldn't want that abuse on anyone else, one of the things that happened when we went to try to sue the Catholic Church, very unsuccessfully, even to get recognized, was I do remember there was a priest lawyer who sat me down and said, but look, you have turned your scars into stars. And I loved that saying, even though it was coming, if you will, from the oppressor who was trying to still negate my experience. The idea that we as a people can change our scars into stars, I am sure I am a better educator because I had the opportunity to not have a voice and go through that. I am sure I am empathetic because of that. I know that the work I did with hospice, when sometimes people don't have a voice left, or with the abused children that I did with guardian ad litems, which in some states are called CASAs.
CASA, yeah, I have somebody close to me that was a CASA. Yeah.
So when I did that work, I know that that empathy sprung from those moments. And I would not, I would not, I don't know, well, we can't go back. So I'm not going to say, would I trade that for this?
Yes.
That's a stupid question. I just know the source of that.
I appreciate you talking about that, Grace, because again, people need to hear it also. And again, that self-blame, when, I went through, it was like, what did I do? What was it? And I came across a picture of myself at that age. And that just changed everything for me. It's like, look at that little dorky looking kid with a butch or crew cut or whatever it was. And that it was because I didn't perceive it that way. I kept thinking, what signals did I give? How did I lure him? Whatever. I mean, how did I self-blame? And I think a lot of people feel that way. And then
I think so too. And I think people don't always understand that it really doesn't have a lot to do about sex. It has a lot to do about power. It's a sexual act, but I've always felt it has a lot to do about power and power you can have over somebody smaller than you.
Can you stay a little bit longer?
I can stay as long as you like.
Let me ID. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland, copyright Be Free Radio Limited, 2022, produced by the lovely Miss Buddy Face in cooperation with White Rabbit Production. Louis B. Free Radio Show, Brain Food from the Heartland is an adult-oriented show intended for and only for a mature adult audience. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Thank you for allowing me. I probably said that. Someone said to me recently, how many times do you think you've said that over the years? Countless.
Very well done. Not your first rodeo. Not your first rodeo.
The first time. But again, when you talk about that, from that, and how some people are so different about that, and you would think it would be empathy building. And when you said some people, well, kind of mine was worse than yours. I've heard of that. I know that about some people who were victimized. And I just think that's, so we're in that club and you're going to say that? Awful.
Yeah, awful.
We've got to say hi to our friend Meg, who is with us. Meg
Wonderful.
Nostro. Yeah. She's got a couple of comments here.
Hello, Meg. Wonderful to see you. Or not see you, but know you're there.
Amazing. She says, amazing grace and her beautiful smile was one of the things. Yeah. So interesting how your backstory it's healed and an extent through your character in your book. Pretty amazing as you evolve higher. And we both just love Meg, don't we?
She, I didn't even know the word manifesting, I think, before,
Oh,
I don't know,
really?
maybe in the last year. I was like, what's this thing about manifesting? So this idea of putting things out into the universe, but then also this idea that we can help each other out in this universe is the thing that I just love. And Meg has this fabulous daily reader. She's got several books, but the one that I'm loving is Her Magical Guide to
Right.
Bliss. It's
Yeah.
a daily reader.
Beautiful.
It's got quotes. And I love the idea. And she does such great work on her podcast too.
Yeah. Oh, she absolutely. I love that. About you with your broadcast, what is it like for you doing the interview?
It's been it's a real journey. I have two shows. The first is called The Storytellers, and it's the backstory to largely authors, but I've done Nobel Peace Prize winners. I've done somebody who invented a science. She invented the science of studying the tops of trees called Canopy Science. And I learned from her that we actually put a man on the moon before we put people in the tops of trees to study what is half the life form on this planet. So that was amazing. So a lot of authors, I did The Woman from Sweet Honey in the Rock, where I referenced the songs that you can hear from that group on my website. So I love doing that. It's a show that I'm still learning. It used to have a half-hour format, and now the station really wants me to get to a 15-minute format, and I just love.
They want to cut it down?
Well, apparently their research says 15 minutes is really great. And I find an hour is lovely.
Yeah, I agree.
So then I can always invite a guest back for a second time. So we are done season 1. We are booked fully for season 2, which is great. And then we will start Launchpad, which was my brainchild. I work with the lovely Mary Helen Sheriff, who is the CEO of that Bookish Road Trip group that I talked about. We run it very much like a corporation. And with Mary Helen at the helm, we run it like a corporation. And she's also we all do different things. That's a whole nother thing authors love to talk about, is what we do in the rest of our lives that isn't sitting and writing. So Mary is starting a book called Author Marketing Coach. And I said, oh, well, let's just do another radio show on people who are launching books. So we called it Launchpad, and to come on the show, you get a half-hour show, you're on with 3 other authors, you cross-promote, which is the thing that I love. It's how we lift each other up. You get 15 minutes of marketing with Mary, which is brilliant. And then because I have this really weird entrepreneurial mind, I've started 4 companies, and I just have this weird entrepreneurial mind. I'm always thinking, oh, now what should we do? So we're actually pitched to a publisher 3 books, and got accepted to do 3 books called Launchpad. Launchpad, the countdown to writing your book, Launchpad, the countdown to publishing your book, and Launchpad, the countdown to marketing your book. So it's going to be a 3-book set. It'll be an anthology. If I'm really lucky, Louie, I'll get it out the door by spring. The 3 of them out the door by spring.
So I've got to ask you, what do you do in your spare time? There is no spare time, right?
but I am not as efficient as I need to be. I took a hiatus, which is just a joke. I really took like 6 weeks thinking I was just going to write my next novel. But instead I decided, let's write 3 books about Launchpad. I have this idea for how to improve your life with authors, one day at a time, one podcast at a time. And I'm hoping we can make that come off the page, because authors are always looking for ways to change their life. And I know I grew as an author out of experiences like yours. Some door will open to me because of being on your show. It may be you're going to tell one of your favorite other radio hosts that, you're going to tell somebody at a Rotary Club. Something will change because you and I have exchanged time here together.
That's beautiful. Great. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I'll send you guests, and you'll send me in other places. And that's very much what Meg is about, right?
Meg,
so
Meg it's been beautiful with that.
So I think that that concept of, so I'm working, that's the other thing I'm working on, is that concept of going back to that woman from Spunky Old Broad Radio, changing your life one podcast at a time, one interview at a time, one book at a time, one blog at a time, or just one day of networking at a time.
That's wonderful. And that desire to help others and lift up. Tell me a little bit more about that, where you think that comes from. I mean, we touched on something earlier, but.
Well, I think it comes from, again, you and I are of a certain age. It's the compilation of the whole. I am lucky enough to have made the money I need to make in life from my previous careers.
Entrepreneur. Yeah.
You know, I like I said, I started 4 companies. Now I just, not only am I very grateful for those people, men and women, who have helped lift me up, but I think that's our job in life. And I love the opportunity to mentor young women, particularly, although I do mentor one young man, but I love mentoring young women and just sharing what we know. When I think, Louis, 2 years ago when the Eves came out, I didn't know what a TBR was, a to be read pile. I didn't know what a WIP was, a work in progress. We could come up with a whole litany of things I didn't know, including that I didn't know how to Zoom or StreamYard or edit a post on social media. So that's in that first book called Launchpad. There's going to be kind of a quick guide to those things, because I want to give people that on-ramp. And I'm still hoping, I'm hoping The Eves becomes a Netflix series. I put that out in the world. I'm hoping, NPR suddenly says, oh, I was listening to Louis Be Free, and she needs to be on NPR. I think we need to, what Meg would tell us to do is to manifest. But as we continue to lift people up, we are also continued to be lifted up.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's absolutely beautiful. And by the way, attorney Mitchell Garabedian, who's been on the show a number of times over the years, does such a great job of suing Catholic Church and others for victimizing kids. And he's just always been so modest. And when he's been on with me, of course, I told him my story, and I praise him because he's had all these successes and brought a lot of things out of the shadows, if you will. And he will say to me, he said, I stand on the shoulders of people like you, of people who were victimized and had the strength to come out. Check them out sometime.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm sorry, that was a real aside. I should have emailed that to you. Again,
well, you can do that later, because I never remember people's names. So
no filter
we'll
between
hook up off air.
I'm told my greatest asset is also my greatest liability. There's no filter between my brain and my mouth. So just out there. Sometimes it's good, and sometimes people kind of, you said that.
But that's true of all of us, right? So I'm super organized, which makes me able to do all of these things.
You're the other end of the spectrum for me.
But yeah. Oh yeah. I would come to your office and rearrange. I love looking at that. But if I had to work in your space, that would be all in neat little columns.
I had a guest in studio a few months ago that said, I think I'm going to have a panic attack just looking at your stuff.
You're surrounded by things you love.
She offered to help organize me. And I said, that would be great for like a week, and then come back to this. Yeah. You are highly organized to do all the things. You've had tremendous response and beautiful things about the Eves. What's that like for you?
This is where I might cry. I am always so touched by somebody who bothers to leave a review. Reviews are an author's lifeblood. And I'm very bad, because we should be asking them for our podcasts and our radio shows, and I never do. And that's on my to-do list to remember to do that. But when somebody says to me, the story I needed to hear, the story that helped me heal, The story that challenged me to do more, a story for storytellers. Uh, Authors tend to be very bad in general, I think, of promoting their own work. We love talking about it, but it's very hard for authors, I think, to say things like, "Hi, I'm Grace Sammon. I rank at 4.7 stars on every single platform." You know, it is hard to say that.
Yeah.
Um,
Because you're modest.
but
You don't, yeah. Right.
but it's so important. And I do read the reviews. And like I said, our job is to touch people's hearts. And so when that comes across in a review, it's magic for sure.
That's beautiful. I'm going to ask you back for a part two. And we didn't talk enough, my fault, about the Eves, but you are such a wonderful, and to find out like who, for me, when I do the interviews, I feel everybody can read the book. My job is to learn more about the person that wrote it.
Yes.
Again, you see all my folded down pages and notes that I don't go in order. I
love it.
discursive brain. But you are wondrous, and I'm so thankful to Meg Nossero for connecting us. And I'd love to hear about, feel your heart. And I love that. Yeah. Is that how I do it?
Little heart shapes.
Yeah. I've got a little, this is my old library shirt. I love my library. It's got a heart. I've got my collection of library shirts. And if someone sees me out when I'm incognito, I don't wear one of my many library shirts. And once in a while, someone will come up to me and say, "I wasn't sure if it was you because you don't have a library shirt on." Well, I'm incognito.
I love it. I love it.
It's so wonderful. You are amazing. So a little bit more about your website.
My website is www.gracesammon, SAMMON, gracesammon.net, not com, .net. And there you can listen to all my Storyteller episodes. You'll be able to learn about Launchpad. You'll get the playlist. There's recipes from the Eves. There's stuff about me. There's blogs. We just redid it. I'm super grateful to my brother, who happens to live in Ohio, who does all of that work for me. There's my book trailer, which I adore. He also did my book trailer. And I think that's my single best piece of advertising, by the way. And I just love to connect with people. I always answer every single email. I love to come to book clubs, libraries, Rotaries, all of the above.
Where in Ohio is your brother? Do you mind? Just what portion? Not the city, just
Cleveland-ish.
Okay.
My dad was born in Cleveland, so
wonderful.
Yeah, he's in a suburb of Cleveland somewhere.
You are such a beautiful human. You are so giving. I love that about you. And please come back and do the gig with me again. Seriously, because. And then
I would be beyond honored. You have been such a great host. I'll come back anytime.
And then maybe I'll get to my list of questions that I'll ask the first one on. And then it's like, well, you do this all the time. The response to the first question may lead me somewhere else. Not this, and I wouldn't like to do that. So, that 10 questions that publicists will send, suggested questions. I believe the author's got to, I hate to say be bored with that, but if they get the same questions asked all the time, and I just never know where it's going to go.
I agree.
Somewhere.
I agree. And it's lovely to have this amount of time with you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You'll come back, right? That's an on-air commitment. On-air commitment, right?
On air, on my honor.
Okay. Thank you so much. Again, ladies and gentlemen, she is so wonderful.